All right, we're about to get started on chapter 4. Just gotta make sure I save it. Hold on, something's wrong. 223. Okay, never mind. Open. I thought chapters were out of order, which means that I named one wrong. Okay. Today we'll be continuing The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus by L. Frank Baum. 4. How Little Mayrie Became Frightened. The winter was over now, and all the Laughing Valley was filled with joyous excitement. The brook was so happy at being free once again that it gurgled more boisterously than ever, and dashed so recklessly against the rocks that it sent showers of spray high in the air. The grass thrust its sharp little blades upward through the mat of dead stalks, where it had hidden from the snow, but the flowers were yet too timid to show themselves, although the reels were busy feeding their roots. The sun was in remarkably good humor and sent his rays dancing merrily throughout the valley. Claus was eating his dinner one day when he heard a timid knock on his door. "Come in," he called. No one entered, but after a pause came another rapping. Claus jumped up and threw open the door. Before him stood a small girl holding a smaller brother fast by the hand. "Is you Claus?" she asked shyly. "Indeed I am, my dear," he answered with a laugh, as he caught both children in his arms and kissed them. "You are very welcome, and you've come just in time to share my dinner." He took them to the table and fed them with fresh milk and nut cakes. When they had eaten enough, he asked, "Why have you made this long journey to see me?" "I wants a tat," replied little Mayrie. And her brother, who had not yet learned to speak many words, nodded his head and exclaimed like an echo, "Tat!" "Oh, you want my toy cats, do you?" returned Claus, greatly pleased to discover that his creations were so popular with children. The little visitors nodded eagerly. "Unfortunately," he continued, "I have but one cat now ready, for I carried 2 to children in the town yesterday, and the one I have shall be given to your brother, Mayrie, because he is the smaller, and the next one I make shall be for you." The boy's face was bright with smiles as he took the precious toy Claus held out to him, but little Mayrie covered her face with her arm and began to sob grievously. I want it to now," she wailed. Her disappointment made Claus feel miserable for a moment. Then he suddenly remembered Shigra. "Don't cry, darling," he said soothingly. "I have a toy much nicer than a cat, and you shall have that." He went to the cupboard and drew out the image of the lioness, which he placed on the table before Mayrie. The girl raised her arm and gave one glance at the fierce teeth and glaring eyes of the beast, and then, uttering a terrified scream, she rushed from the house. The boy followed her, also screaming lustily and even dropping his precious cat in his fear. For a moment, Claus stood motionless, being puzzled and astonished. Then he threw Shigra's image into the cupboard and ran after the children, calling to them not to be frightened. Little Mayrie stopped in her flight, and her brother clung to her skirt, but they both cast fearful glances at the house until Claus had assured them many times that the beast had been locked in the cupboard. "Yet why were you frightened at seeing it?" he asked. "It's only a toy to play with." "It's bad," said Mayrie decidedly, and just horrid and not a bit nice like tats." "Perhaps you are right," returned Claus thoughtfully. "But if you will return with me to the house, I will soon make you a pretty cat." So they timidly entered the house again, having faith in their friend's words, and afterward they had the joy of watching Claus carve out a cat from a bit of wood and paint it in natural colors. It did not take him long to do this, for he had become skillful with his knife by this time, and Mayrie loved her toy. For he had become skillful with his knife by this time, and Mayrie loved her toy the more dearly because she had seen it made. After his little visitors had trotted away on their journey homeward, Claus sat long in deep thought, and he then decided that such fierce creatures as his friend the lioness would never do as models from which to fashion his toys. There must be nothing to frighten the dear babies, he reflected, And while I know she grow well and am not afraid of her, it is but natural that children should look upon her image with terror. Hereafter I will choose such mild-mannered animals as squirrels and rabbits and deer and lambkins from which to carve my toys, for then the little ones will love rather than fear them. He began his work that very day, and before bedtime had made a wooden rabbit and a lamb. They were not quite so lifelike as the cats had been, because they were formed from memory, while Blinky had sat very still for Claus to look at while he worked. But the new toys pleased the children nevertheless, and the fame of Claus's playthings quickly spread to every cottage on the plain and in village. He always carried his gifts to the sick or crippled children, but those who were strong enough walked to the house in the valley to ask for them, so a little path was soon worn from the plain to the door of the toymaker's cottage. First came the children who had been playmates of Claus, before he began to make toys. These, you may be sure, were well supplied. Then children who lived further away heard of the wonderful images, and made journeys to the valley to secure them. All little ones were welcome, and never a one went away empty-handed. This demand for his handiwork kept Claus busily occupied, but he was quite happy in knowing the pleasure he gave to so many of the dear children. His friends, the immortals, were pleased with his success and supported him bravely. The Knooks selected for him clear pieces of soft wood that his knife might not be blunted in cutting them. The Reals kept him supplied with paints of all colors, and brushes fashioned from the tips of timothy grasses. The fairies discovered that the workmen needed saws and chisels and hammers and nails as well as knives, and brought him a good array of Claus soon turned his living room into a most wonderful workshop. He built a bench before the window, and arranged his tools and paints so that he could reach everything as he sat on his stool. And as he finished toy after toy to delight the hearts of the little children, he found himself growing so gay and happy that he could not refrain from singing and laughing and whistling all the day long. "It's because I live in the Laughing Valley where everything else laughs," said Claus. But that was not the reason. Thank you for joining Bite at a Time Books today, while we read a bite of one of your favorite classics. Again, my name is Bree Carlisle, and I hope you come back tomorrow for the next bite of the life and adventures of Santa Claus. I was reading the biography. This book was actually not well received. People liked his... I feel like it was one of those... So people liked his Wizard of Oz, obviously. But then it's like one of those series where I feel like he just kept writing it, because it was like, oh, the first one was good, and then it was kind of like, after that. And then he kept writing it, and then someone else picked it up and continued to write on it. And like, it's just like this ongoing series that's like never ended. Like at some point, the series has to stop. I prefer if it's a series. Now, these are obviously children's books, like it's a little bit different. But for me, I prefer a series to have you don't need to plan it down to the scene, which I know some authors do, but there needs to be an overarching goal for the series. By the end of the series, like this is the big thing that's going to happen in the last book. You should have all of your like major plots, twisty things that are going to happen in each book in the series so that you have an idea for how many books it needs to be. How are you going to get from point A at the beginning of the series to point B at the very end? What battles, what triumphs, what conflicts need to happen between book one and book whatever to get to the end? What things does the main characters need to go through to get you to the end of the series? At the point that you've reached that pinnacle point, end it. The end. Finish it the way that you wanted it to be finished, and that is the end of your book. That is my opinion. Take it as you may. That is how I like my books to be. I like there to be a clear overarching thing, not just to like keep going. And it's funny, there's a book series that I have not read the last book, and I don't think it's the last book. But I saw someone on TikTok yesterday said, It was like book series that should have stopped before they did. And this particular book series that I've had a hard time finishing was on their list. And I'm like, maybe that's it, they just kept dragging it out because it was making money. I get that we all want to make money, but maybe if you come out with another series, you'd make more money. I also like when there's sister series, like, so say like the main series follows Jane and John. Main series follows Jane and John. Jane and John's, run many characters throughout their series of detectiving. I don't know. And then, you finish Jane and John's series, and then Jane and John in the last book run into Todd and Marcy. And Todd and Marcy are not detectives, but they are crime scene investigators. And so, or forensics people or something, something related that they ran into them for that, or they happened to own a bookstore that the detectives had to talk to the owner, something. So you do a spin-off series with those characters. That's not necessarily continuing the series. It's like a spin-off series, but it could also be done really, really well. I think those are also okay if done correctly. I've read one series that started off with is this like four brothers. It was a romance series, but it was like these four brothers, and so each book was one of the four brothers, and then they at some point run into this like spy organization. So then it's like a spin-off series of this, which was like 10 books long, of these 10 spies. And then there was another spin-off series of like, we're all married and have kids and stuff, so now we need to train like 10 new recruits. And so then there was a third spin-off series, or second of the spin-off, third series overall, of this like younger class of spies. So that is okay. That is done. They were written well. I liked them. It's a very indie author though. Like, no one's probably ever heard of her. I can't think of her name right now. But yeah, anyways, I gotta get off this and go do my normal job. Bye.